Hello, everyone. Wow, it seems like an eternity since we last did a live Q&A. We'll see if people even remember that we're doing this. It's been so long. I don't think we did anything last week, did we, when both of us were away? I don't believe Igor did a live last week. He was pretty swamped holding the fort down for us.
I think
How are you
so.
doing, Alicia?
I am doing very well, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Looks like we've got a few people that are tuning in here. Nicole is here. Hey, Nicole, how's it going? We'll get this adjusted here. Oh, yes, we have had no shortage of changes within immigration, despite Alicia and I trying to get some downtime and doing some holidaying. And so even though we've been away, immigration has continued to evolve, change, announcements. And one thing we know for certain when it comes to Canada immigration, change is the constant. And that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think really those people who are on top of things and are really following what's going on and being strategic about their immigration pathways are the ones who are going to be winners in this whole process. So I'm really pleasantly surprised when I meet with clients and consultations who have really done their homework and they're being smart about what kind of application they're submitting, or they're submitting two different types of applications and seeing which one's going to hopefully be picked.
Indeed. And all across the country, it seems like especially the smaller provinces, we'll call them, the ones that traditionally have not seen massive influxes of potential candidates for permanent residence in their provinces. They're all kind of struggling with what they're going to do. And Alberta is no different. We've seen some significant turmoil occurring all through the summer with the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program. As many of you know, I attended a call with some of the heads of the program to discuss some of the problems that were occurring with their race to file process. And Alicia and I did a live on that topic here on the YouTube channel, and it created so much stress for people. Well, we know that they decided that they were going to put a pause to this race to file. And if we go to the, let's just go to the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program site right here. So updates here. So if we read the updates, you can see that on August the 12th, August the 7th, they indicated that they were going to create a new expression of interest system, which is exactly the message that we relayed to them. And we also know that there was a report that was issued right here, which is the Express Entry year-end report for last year, 2023. And this is the fact sheet. But ultimately, what we're getting, one common theme here, is the importance of tying immigration to economic needs. And Alicia, I don't know what your thoughts on this expression of interest system. Do you think that was a good decision based on what they were doing before?
Oh, anything was an improvement from what they were doing before with this QIT system. It was just an absolute nightmare and it was a mess. And I see people in the chat saying, we've had to take days off work. It was like tearing out your hair. So yes, it is good that they moved away from that. It's interesting, Mark, if you click on the processing times and application levels, basically AAIP and many of the other provinces, so we're talking about Alberta, but this is applying across the board to many other provinces, we're now middle of August, almost end of August, and provinces are already hitting their quotas. And so we are so close to basically not having any space. So I think it makes sense that Alberta said there's no point having this ridiculous QIT system for August, July, August. Let's just cut it off. And end of September, so the very end of September, they're going to open it up for this expression of interest system. But if you take a look, there are very few nomination spots left. And some of them, they're going to be drawing from people who managed to squeak in that ridiculous system. So there are not going to be very many spots left. And so I really want people to prepare for the fact that if AOS was the only basket that you were putting your eggs in, you probably need to start looking at what are your other options for extending work permits? What are your other ways to try to increase your human capital factors? How are you increasing your language scores? Because you may not get a nomination this year. You might be looking into an expression of interest that's going to roll into next year.
Yes. And the key numbers that I want for those of you who are looking at Alberta, which Alicia and I are here, this is our breadbasket, essentially Alberta. This is where we where we are focused, where we live, where we practice. This is our province. And the key factors here, especially for those who are looking at the Alberta Opportunity Stream, you can see number of nominations issued for 2024 to date. And I think the last update, let's see, as of August 19th, so literally 2 days ago, this was updated. So 3,785 is how many have already been issued. Their total estimate for this year is only, just under 5,400, 5,393. And if you look down here, 3,785 already been issued. And then you go here and you say, how many are unprocessed? 2,766. So as you can see here, you guys, if you add up those two numbers are greater than this number right here. So for AOS, they've already hit it. Express entry streams, target 1775, and you add up, 1487 with, they have 812. So from the vast majority of these programs, they're already past what they have in terms of allocations. And what you need to understand is that they can't go beyond this. Like this, subject to some, reallocation sometimes at the end of the year if some provinces haven't used all that they needed. And interestingly, Alicia, I did a PNP kind of Western Canada presentation with LPEN, one of the legal professional education networks. And I invited a couple of friends, Reese from Manitoba, and let's see, who was it? Saskatchewan. Chris. Yes, Chris from Saskatchewan. And they announced this. And when did I do it? It was right on the day that they made the announcement that we were doing it live. So I hadn't done my presentation, and talk about real time changing to a presentation when the government makes an announcement that they're not continuing forward with the race to file. And so we basically did it on the fly. But hey, this is what we do every week, Alicia. We're always talking about things, and people will make a notification right while we're going live that there's been a round of invitations. So not new. But essentially, with this, what people have to understand is that the province all these provinces are going to have to make some really tough decisions. And with only 9,750 nominations granted, they can't go beyond it. So there's only two things that happen. One, processing times are going to continue to increase.
Yeah.
And they have to figure out the intake, what's coming in. So that's a really good lead in to Abhishek. So Abhishek's question here, he says, good morning, Mark. What do you think would be the scoring factors for the upcoming new AAIP worker streams? Well, guys, it's not going to be rocket science. It's not. BC and Ontario have been playing with this for years and years, expressions of interest systems. Saskatchewan has been using this for a number of years. So if you want to wonder, okay, well, what are the factors going to be? Look to those provinces, Abhishek. Look to how they're structured. Extra points for certain industries. Well, Alberta may be a little bit different than Ontario or BC. Extra points if you choose to live outside of Calgary and Edmonton. Maybe there's extra points for rural. Although Alberta does have the rural renewal stream, we're not sure. Human capital will play a role. How good is your education? Have you studied in Alberta? Is your language skills, are they high? So all of those things will play a factor. What are your thoughts, Alicia?
Well, and one thing I want to circle back to, so when we look at the numbers, it is possible that AAIP could literally just pull from their existing pool and they would meet all of their nomination targets for 2024. But it might be that they start to cherry pick, that they say, you know what, all these people applied, but we like candidate C, who's applying through this new expression of interest, better than historical candidates. And we don't know. They've not said what they're going to do with that. And so that causes a lot of uncertainty and a lot of frustration. But Alberta has always said there's no guarantees. We are not going to even potentially process an application that you've submitted, even though we've taken your application fees. There's no guarantee at all. So it could be that even though you managed to squeak in your application through this race to file, people who are new applicants under the new expression of interest system, they might get a nomination, whereas somebody who's been sitting in the pool may not. So we just don't know. So that is why it is important to keep track of what's going to happen with this new expression of interest system and to try to maximize your points. And so I see some people talking about, what about language, right? If you have a CLB 10, is that going to give you a leg up in this new expression of interest system versus a CLB 7? Probably.
Yes. And one thing I want to point out too, Alberta is already picking winners and losers. So they're
Yeah.
already doing it. So you can see when they have this massive group, and these are applications that are unprocessed, they're currently in the queue, you can see. But even now, processing, they are currently assessing applications received on or before December 14th, 2023. But yet, if you look to the express entry system, sorry, these streams right here, the dedicated healthcare pathway, they're processing July 5th. So what does that tell you? Well, healthcare is a real primary, focus for the province. So if they only have so many they can issue this year, they're going to focus on the areas of utmost importance. So if you're applying through the healthcare pathway, you're going to get a nomination in basically a month and a half. Even the other pathways and initiatives are still a priority with March 6th processing. At least this is the applications that they're on right now. And yes, this can change. February 3rd, 2024 rural renewal stream, this used to be really quick, but now it's just getting longer and longer and longer because the demand is so high. And once again, tourism and hospitality, they're pumping through these really quick. So it's interesting to see how this plays out, but they are already, and Alberta has already prioritized. And one other thing, Alicia, that I want to point out, and I can't remember if it's listed here or where they specifically state it, but the reality is all through the various PNPs, these are programs of policy. So they can make changes extremely fast. They can, from one day to the next, just like they announced, we're going to have, let me go back to the race to file. So everybody will remember that they had it all laid out. We're going to do this many on this day, this many for August, this many for September, this many for October. And after, our call, clearly they realized there were problems. We said, look, you can't do that. It's not going to accomplish what you want. So they made the announcement. We're not doing that anymore. Changed our mind, right? And no notice. So they can do whatever the heck they want. And they also have disclaimers all over the place. And it's not just Alberta, it's all provinces, that anytime you submit an application, that's great. You may be fully eligible. You may be just, meeting all the requirements. But we can still choose to do whatever the heck we want. If we don't want to issue a nomination, we won't. And you have no say in that matter. We will choose who we think are the best candidates. And, you just do what we tell you to do, and maybe it might work out. Which comes back to Alicia's strong, strong encouragement to not put all of your eggs in one basket, right?
Yeah. And this is where we come back to express entry, right? Because the beautiful thing about express entry is that we used to have certainty. We used to have some sort of transparency. And the difficult thing about the new category-based selection is that we're losing some of that transparency. We're losing some of that predictability because the government is picking winners and losers based on the economic priority that they have set for that ministerial instruction when they do the round under a category-based selection. And so the critique of express entry with the new category-based draws is you used to be able to understand, here's my human capital, here are my CRS points, I've met my minimum eligibility for either federal skilled worker or CEC or FST. I know that I ought to be getting an invitation to apply in the next draw, but because they've sprinkled in now category-based selection draws, we just don't know. We know that it significantly affects the CRS, right? If they do a whole bunch of back-to-back French language draws, for example, the overall general CRS is going to go through the roof. And so it infuses a lot of uncertainty for people. And I get it. It's frustrating when you've been working for years to try to accumulate your Canadian experience and your education and your language points, and all of a sudden you just don't know if you're possibly going to get an ITA.
Yeah. That's the most difficult aspect of being an immigration lawyer today. And I've talked about this for years, literally. When I started practice, I truly felt that there was a pathway for everyone and I could fix any problem that someone had. There was always someone I could speak to, or there was an alternative, an alternative process, or you'd get a second chance. If someone did something wrong, they could just resubmit and their application would go through. Well, with the crushing demand on Canadian immigration, that's not the case. And since the inception of express entry, and as things started to evolve, and as the CRS score started to go up, and as people started to realize that, just because they got an invitation to apply did not mean that they would always be eligible for an ITA in the future. You know, the refusal or the return of an application as being incomplete could literally be the difference between staying in Canada permanently and not. And I remember saying this back in before the pandemic, pre-pandemic, I was warning people, look, you may not get a second chance.
Mhm.
And now I can almost, almost for the vast majority of people say, if you get an invitation to apply, this may be your only chance. And you just do not have the luxury of hoping that what you're submitting is good enough. And within our firm, we push the services of express entry and as a major priority to what we do. You look at the DIY course, and tonight I'm having another masterclass tonight associated with those who've subscribed to the course at any time in the past can come and join. And there's a link in the description to the 2024 accelerator. And I've seen a bunch of people that have subscribed lately, which, is an indicator of the rounds of invitations that have been coming through. But at no other time in the history of express entry is the process more volatile. They are not showing a lot of mercy. And if you have the slightest thing wrong, they're going to refuse your application. And I'll finish with one other thing. It's not just the feds, it's the provinces. And I've got a client, which, I'm returning all of his funds that he paid me, even the amount that we used to submit the OINP. I'm returning all of his funds because his application got returned because we neglected to click off one little box on one of the authorization forms. So even though he signed it, dated it, because we didn't check that little box off, the ONIP returned it as being incomplete, which when you're in some kind of an expression of interest and you just happen to hit the right spot with maybe it's a stem draw with a slot of just the right CRS, that may never come again. And so the consequences are off the charts. And it just baffles me, Alicia, how people are so willing to just prepare their application and submit it on their own. And I don't mean you have to hire someone to help you, but without having someone else do a double check, a second look to verify that you haven't missed something or overlooked something or answered something improperly.
Yeah, it's
the
it's a
world.
tough landscape out there right now.
Okay, let's see what Nash starts off with here. So Nash says, hello from Red Deer. Hope you've had a great summer vacation. I'm glad I didn't have to cancel mine for AOS. Still looking forward to the podcast on intention to reside for PNPs.
Oh yeah, we said we were going to do that.
Oh,
Did it not get published,
Oh,
Mark?
Alicia. Things
We
have
did it.
definitely fallen by the wayside and that podcast should be released. Thank you, Nash. I have a bunch queued up, and that's actually kind of a little bit of a segue into this. So Alicia and I spent the morning brainstorming what came out in this year-end report for 2023. And I know what you guys are asking. Questions like, are the categories going to be the same? What does it look like for rounds of invitations? Do we expect CRS scores to go up? If I'm new, thinking about coming to Canada, and I want to become a permanent resident, what can I do now to prepare myself to give myself the most options possible when the time comes for PR? We know there are going to be significant changes here in the fall when it comes to caps for temporary residents, but we also need to see if the Liberal government is deciding to make any changes with the annual levels plans. Are they looking at increasing those levels? Will there be more spots open? Because right now, the number of temporary residents in Canada, I don't have those figures in front of me, how many millions, I don't know. But those who are foreign workers who are looking to transition to PR, there is no way, you guys, no way that I'd say maybe 15% of all of them have a pathway through the federal high skill program through express entry. And when you combine that with the PNPs, it's just like, what do we have? Like 200, a little over 200,000 between the two, express entry and the PNP programs. And when you have over 1 million people, like we're talking, like 15 to 20% will have a pathway to PR. And then what are the options for all the rest of you? And And it's a difficult discussion. So anyway, so Alicia and I, this is a massive report. If we flip over here, you'll see this is the actual report, and it is just loaded with information. It's actually really good. And we were going to record the podcast this morning when we realized, oh my goodness, there's just so much in here to try to digest. And the thing that I like is they have lots of tables, lots of figures, lots of data to demonstrate and show really what happened with the program. Who were the people that applied? What kind of was the CRS range? Which category-based draws were the winners? Which were the losers? And one that we specifically identified, Alicia, as being a major player in express entry is which category?
French.
It's not rocket science, you guys. French language. And what will become of it? Is there's programs that federal programs for Francophone minority communities, I think is how they've described it, that they're looking to roll out. And we'll see how that plays a role. We know that the Francophone Mobilité, the work permit program, has really low entry requirements, a CLB 5, in order to be able to qualify.
So
No longer.
they might pop that up to 7 again, right?
It's
It used to be 7.
possible, right? We don't
Yeah.
know. And we have
Yeah.
an election coming next year. What will happen with the, with the election? Will the Liberals maintain? Will they get a majority? Will they be in a minority government? Will the Conservatives get elected to a minority government or a majority? Those things will play a role in the future of immigration policy determination. On Monday, I met with a member of Parliament from Ontario that's a Conservative MP, and we talked about immigration. I gave him my thoughts on, what I think, should the future of immigration should look like. And they, the Liberals have some real challenges that they're dealing with, that they're trying to work through. And those caps on temporary residency is something they've talked about, but we haven't seen exactly what will happen. We believe, I think, Alicia, you can confirm, but when the annual levels plans are announced, I think probably at that stage, they're going to include the levels for temporary residents, probably in conjunction with permanent residents, but they could do something sooner. I don't know, in terms of determining how many students they're going to let in. Will they put caps on LMIAs? Will they do like the US in the H-1B program where they just will only do so many across the board, like an overall cap? Or will they start to institute caps and further entrench the caps that used to be in place for certain industries, where you can only have a certain proportion of your workforce as foreign workers? But the temporary foreign worker program is smaller in comparison to the international mobility program, and all of you that are out there on open work permits, right? Employers can hire you just like Canadians are permanent residents. So there's no restrictions, on you at this stage.
Yeah, and we're hearing noises, of course, about low-wage LMIAs and the problems with low-wage LMIAs and tied to certain employers. We've been hearing noises about, maybe they will increase fees for LMIAs. We were taking a look. I was looking yesterday at the policies for the temporary foreign worker program, specifically with respect to compliance, employer compliance, and the fees and collecting. They actually can garnish wages or garnish taxes for the corporations that are not actually paying their administrative monetary penalties. So they are actually putting teeth into some of these temporary foreign worker program violations, and that's a good thing. That's important. It could be that they're going to start saying, we're going to have permanent residence programs that we've been hearing kind of stirrings that maybe there will be PR pathways for certain types of workers that they didn't used to have before. So all of this is looking at a new shift to try to deal with the thorny problem of temporary foreign workers, especially low-wage temporary foreign workers.
Right. And this is something I wanted to pull up because not a lot of people are talking about this, but this forward regulatory plan, 2024-2026. So this regulatory regulation, this regulatory amendment, you can see here, it's being proposed, would include the introduction of a new permanent economic class for workers with experience in training, education, experience and responsibilities occupations. I don't know exactly what that means, Alicia. Maybe it's further defined below. I haven't looked at this in detail, but basically support the modernization of economic immigration systems by expanding the selection of PRs to candidates with a more diverse range of skills and experience. So I have to assume that experience and responsibility occupations are occupations that you gain your eligibility for them through your experience working in them, as opposed to education, where our tier 3, 2, 1, 0, those higher tiers often are based on the level of education that you obtained that makes you then qualified to work in those occupations. So I have to assume that the experience is more related to work experience based positions. And so we don't know fully what this would look like, but they're opening the door to create a program for that. And, Alicia, I as an immigration lawyer, the more tools that I have in my toolbox, the better. And the more options that are available for people that may not otherwise have pathways to PR, I'm okay with that. Because my real concern right now is that with the number of people already that are what we'd call undocumented right now in Canada, people whose work permits have expired and they have not gone home, those numbers we know are actually quite high. And they're only going to get higher as people have fewer and fewer pathways to PR. And
And
yeah,
yeah, and the interesting thing, Mark, is I had some clients who had CRS scores that were super high, right? Above 500, but they were not able to get an ITA. And now finally we're seeing a little bit of an easing of that situation, right? And kudos to people like my clients who their work permits were running out and they said, you know what, I'm going to keep my express entry profile in there. I'm going to go back home to my home country. I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep up my foreign work experience and I'm going to hope for that ITA. And they got it. And so now that they've been starting to do those draws and we're getting, lower 500s for the CRS, for the general draws or CEC draws, finally people are starting to have hope about being able to come back because, they didn't overstay. They're going to put that concerted effort into getting that express entry application done right. And now that they're finally getting ITAs under the low 500s, that's now a possibility for people again. So
yes,
hopefully things will start to come back around.
you bet. All right. Well, as always, this is a live Q&A, you guys. So we've been posting some of the comments that people have been making, but let's get into some questions now. And we appreciate all those who take the time to post a question. Just like the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program, not all questions will be answered, just like not all applications will be processed. We will try to select the ones that are the most benefit to the viewers, both those who are watching live, and we know we're recording this at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, and we know that the vast majority of our viewers will watch this as a recording after because you're at work. But for Alicia and I, this is the time that is the least disruptive to our schedules, our busy practices, and our families. So we will continue to do this every Wednesday at 10 a.m. And hopefully, those of you in Eastern Canada, maybe it's on your lunch break, you can tune in. But we always enjoy when people post where they're tuning in from. So if you are watching this from wherever you are in the world, don't hesitate to post a little comment. And periodically, as we're talking, I'll pull up a little your post and give you a little shout out. But not all questions will be answered. We'll try to select the ones that are the most beneficial. And remember always that we, Alicia and I, we are Canadian immigration lawyers. We love doing this, but our firm, we represent people. We work with you. We help you. And at the end of the day, it's easy to just come. And if you have a question, you need assistance, everything just starts with a consultation. And then from there, you can see everything in terms of our firm, our fees. Definitely go check out our blogs, our podcasts, all the other tools and resources that we have available to help you in your immigration journey. So definitely remember. And if someone asks a question that is really super, super specific, then you're probably going to hear this little triangle, which says, that's really something that requires some legal advice for us to analyze your situation specifically, and it's best suited in an immigration consultation. All right. And it's easy to do on the website. Easy to do it. Okay. Let's start with Marissa's question. Okay. This is interesting because there's all kinds of misinformation that's constantly being posted all over internet land, whether it's your WhatsApp group, whether it's the forum that you've found or your Facebook group or whatever it is. There's all kinds of stuff that is just all over the map. So Marissa says, is it true that the medical exam is no longer required for express entry?
No. So you still need a medical exam. It's just that they've changed their policies for certain people who don't have an upfront medical exam. So during the pandemic, they were accepting some older medical exams for certain periods of time, unless there was something like a notification about TB or something like that. However, they have now posted, so if you go onto Express Entry and you check medical exam requirements for Express Entry, and maybe you can pull that up in the background, Mark. I had it because I was showing a client and we were doing letters and we're submitting an application for EAPR this afternoon. But if you go onto the website and you check, it says, as of the end of October of 2023, an upfront medical exam is no longer required for when you submit your EAPR. However, you will still need to do that medical exam once immigration gives you that medical instruction letter, the MIL. So if you've never done it, then yeah, you're going to have to do it. If you have completed it and certain parameters apply, put it in. Put it in as an attachment to your Express Entry application and show that you've done it. But quote this policy and say, look I know that as of the fall of 2023, IRCC has changed their policy on upfront medical exams for Express Entry, and they're still going to give you an upload spot. So this is where people start to worry and they're wondering
Yeah.
what they're going to put. Well, refer to this section, get a screenshot, get a little cover letter and say, I'm following IRCC's updated policy. Make sure to go back and keep checking this policy because they could change it again. But point out the fact that you are happy to do that medical once you are instructed to do so with that medical instruction letter. But for the purposes of submitting your EAPR now, you're relying on their policy that you don't have to provide an upfront. You will have to provide it after the processing of your application's been started.
Right. All right, let's go to our next question. This is VK. He says, hey, Mark and Alicia, finally have my ITA. Congratulations. That's awesome. Do you have experience with the processing time under CEC? Well, the reality is for most right now, it's 5 months, but it could be, those processing times are backward looking. So, by the time they get your application right now, it's possible that, by the time they get to you, maybe they've added some more innovative processing efficiencies and it goes down. But if I just pull it up right now, for CEC, you can see the processing times are listed at 5 months here. So, and this says it was last updated July 31st. Really, I'm surprised that they haven't done a better job at updating, but it's summer. Maybe they're just not in a hurry to update these. Usually they do it on a weekly basis, but I don't think much has changed. About 5 months is where we're at with those. Mm-hmm. All right, next question. Okay, here's an interesting question from AN. Could future government or policies impose restrictions on converting PR to citizen, similar to current restrictions on PR pathways? Asking, as the minister said, that not everyone should expect PR. So just to start off with, this is an acknowledgement from Minister Miller, and boy, I haven't brought him up for a while. So Minister Miller is just reiterating stuff that Minister Fraser always hiding. Don't you even think about hiding, buddy. You're the one that was heavily involved in creating the situation we're in right now. But for years and years, Minister Fraser touted how much he loved international students and that you are the best candidates and you guys are the guys that are going to be filling all of our levels plans and there's room for all. Maybe he didn't say all those things, but there was definitely an implication of that. Then, unfortunately, he got moved on and Minister Miller came along. And Minister Miller, he just jumped onto the scene and his role is as the scapegoat. You need someone to blame for everything that's bad. And Minister Miller, I think genuinely has tried to do the best he can with his portfolio, but his message has now had to change. There's too many people and not enough room for PR. So when he says, the minister says that not everyone should expect PR, what he's saying is when your work permits expire, you need to go home. That there is not going to be room for everyone to transition to permanent residence. And we're sorry if there happen to be some other messages that were popping up periodically. And really, even us as immigration lawyers, we could see a pathway generally for our high skilled, high educated, high human capital clients, if they were looking to come to Canada, that was the option we would express. Well, if you're looking to go to school, get your MBA, come to Alberta, for instance, you study at U of A, and then once you complete your studies, you get a 3-year work permit, you get that work experience. We've got the Alberta Opportunity Stream. No problem at all. But then people came and more came. And the one problem was that there was no check on the number of people that were coming in as international students. And if you're telling all of them in the beginning, and I'm not saying that Minister Miller was saying that, and I'm not saying either that Minister Fraser was either, but there was a lot of other people that were definitely highlighting that if you came and worked, got experience, you would have a pathway to PR. So people leveraged their whole lives to be able to come. You are them. I know you are. And now that you're here, there is no guarantee of PR. And we have many consultations where we have to tell people, well, the best thing you can do is to actually go home. And you do not want to stay here illegally. It just destroys everything in your future. And I also see, Alicia, that there are a number of consultants, and I will specifically call them out. I wish I could say their names, but I'm not going to, that are actually peddling this myth that the Liberals are going to magically create an amnesty program to allow everybody to stay. And so just pay them money and they'll have you on the list. Do not buy into that. Is it possible that there may be some unique carve out where they create a little stream for a particular skill set of people that have skills and abilities that Canada needs? Is that possible? Well, of course. An example is the Toronto Construction Worker Program, where people who are out of status can obtain permanent residence because the needs for construction workers in Toronto are so important. So there is a pattern for that. There is a precedent for it. But to think that the 80% of people that may not have a PR that are just going to automatically, the government's going to expand their levels plans, by 5 and say, we're now going to accept in 3 million a year in order to accommodate. And here's this new amnesty program. I don't personally believe that that's going to happen. Alicia, maybe you have a different view on it, but.
Well, and I think coming back to Anne's question, I think with the situation we find ourselves in right now is circumstantial as well, right? There have been life events, global events, COVID being one of the big ones, where the reason that we have so many people is not necessarily that new people were coming during the pandemic. A whole bunch of people were stuck here. All those students were stuck here. And then they kept getting basically grandfathered new work permits and extensions and 18-month extensions. And that's why those numbers of temporary residents have ballooned so hugely, is that we had this big group of people that just never left. And then you still had new people coming in. And so back to Anne's question, I don't really think that they're going to restrict citizenship or change citizenship because it's a different act. But I do think that you're not going to get these magical amnesty programs like Mark was saying. I agree. I don't think that they're going to wave a magic wand and try to solve and grant PR for everybody, because it's going to exceed what their targets are. And they are going to abide by what they've set and their levels plan. And this is how they report, right? It's a business case where they say, the government's told us we're going to bring in this many 100,000 people, we're going to meet that target. And so what I think Minister Miller is saying is not everybody's going to expect PR because it is more competitive. And so simply because of the number of temporary residents that we have who want PR, there's not going to be enough space for everybody. And so this is why those CRS scores are creeping up so high, because it is more and more competitive to get the few spots that are available.
Yes. I'm going to pull up one here from Nash again. So this is a classic example of the challenges we have when we are doing these live Q&As, and even with our consultations. So the one caveat that I always provide to people is that the advice that I'm giving in the consultation is current for that current day in which I'm giving it. And the reason I say that is because the very next day, something can change. A program can change. The government can announce something new or close a program. And so Nash says, I recall asking in the last Q&A if a higher CLB score helps for AAIP. And at the time, the answer was no. Other than, like for the Alberta Opportunity Stream, no. As long as you hit the main, whether you had a CLB 5 or a CLB 9, it didn't play any specific role. And he says, and the answer was a definite no. However, with the new expression of interest, there might be a system that rewards CLB 10 more than CLB 7. Absolutely. Right. And and that makes sense that would be the case. It makes sense. So good question.
And the difficult thing here, Nash, is that when AAIP is designing this new system, there are a number of factors that they know are priorities for the province. And so it might be, hey, they might want somebody with a CLB 10, but it could also be they have a candidate that has a CLB 8, but they have a job offer in an industry where they know that those Alberta employers are lacking workers. So they might pick that person even though somebody else has a CLB 10. So there's a number of different competing factors. And that's why you have an expression of interest system, just like Ontario and just like BC, that the provinces can weigh up all these things and they can say, all right, well, here are the minimum level criteria that we want for this category. And then we're going to pick the highest ranked out of that group because they're going to have generally better adaptability. They are hopefully going to establish themselves in our province.
Yes. And one other thing that I'll point out, I just realized my mic was down, so I apologize. This whole live Q&A, I think my audio was not quite as loud as Alicia's, but that's okay. We'll figure it out. I'll just pull up here. Isabella says, she says, all the category-based draws are version 1. Will there be version 2 coming up soon? What do you think that'll look like? So I think at this stage, Minister Miller has indicated that the categories are not going to change for this year. I think earlier in the year, he had indicated that. It is entirely possible that they make or could make adjustments for 2025, which would be, I guess, in essence, version 2. So the reason they allocate version 1 and version 2 is just for the purposes of reporting to cabinet. When they initiated the whole express entry category-based system, an important part of that was reporting on what happened. And the 2023 report, which Alicia and I are going to do a podcast on that, an episode on that, is just a natural byproduct of their obligations for reporting on what has happened. And they, have indicated very clearly that they are going to try to remain transparent. They're going to engage stakeholders. And so going forward, what or if any changes occur, what the changes could look like really will depend upon the various industries and the reports that the government gets in terms of labor market. That's what will drive the ship. So we'll see how that ultimately plays out. But I think it's possible they could make changes for 2025. But at this stage, this is kind of how things are positioned. Okay, Mohammed says, I had a post-grad work permit. Mohammed, I think almost instantly, I'm going to ring the bell here, but let's see if we can get to some general things here. So anytime someone says, I have this situation, what do I do? That's usually a trigger, not for Mr. Miller, but for the bell to slide over to our firm website over here and click on this easy little link, book a consultation, and then you've got lots of choices. So Alicia, myself, and Igor, we're all here. We had a little bit of vacation, so Alicia and I were a little bit inaccessible the last couple of weeks, but Alicia, myself, and Igor, it's very easy to go in here and book a consultation. Also, remember, you guys, you can subscribe to our Canadian immigration newsletter as well. I'll just highlight that. But let's take a look here a little bit more at what Mohammed is asking here. So he says, I had a post-grad work permit. This is the key. Okay, had. So I'm assuming you don't have one now. And my child had a study permit. Now, okay, we're all on visitor records. Okay, and so I'm assuming the work permit expired, and before it expired, the employer didn't, apply for an LMIA. So it says now I've applied for an LMIA exempt work permit and study permits for my children after getting my PNP. So I think Mohammed is saying that he's got a nomination from a PNP and has applied. Now, I don't know how this all plays out, Mohammed, if this is an R204C work permit that you've applied for, or somehow you've submitted your PNP and now you're eligible for a bridging work permit. I don't know which one it is. It's hard for us to see from this. And this is why we really need to have all the facts, and we can never get it in one live Q&A. The question is, my child can attend school. Can my child go to school? And so, Alicia, I think I'll take a little quick stab at this, and we're not going to offer you, legal advice, Mohammed. We can't say, yes, your child will be able to attend, or no, your child can't. But if, and this is the qualifier. If you're not currently in status, okay, and you're on a visitor record, going from a visitor to a work permit or a study permit that is in process does not confer the right to work or study until the actual document is issued. So generally speaking, that's kind of the law on that issue. But there's guaranteed more background here, Mohammed, that we just can't address. So we encourage you to book a consult. Alicia, do you have anything to add? Have I missed anything in that attempt to to extract enough information to give an answer?
Yeah, and so Mohammed, you've got a super complicated fact scenario for sure, but Mark is correct in general. So if you look at Regulation 30 Sub 2 of the Immigration Refugee Protection Act, and you can also look up IRCC's policy on minors studying in Canada, in general, a minor who is here in Canada with a parent that has a valid work permit is allowed to go to school without a study permit. However, as the parent, if the parent has lost their work permit, then that right away gets rid of the normal exception that kids can go to school. So it does seem like a dicey situation. So I'd encourage you to reach out and book a consult so we can sort out what happened. Also, the age of your kids. And so if your kids are like in preschool or something like that, normally preschools don't care about the status of the parents, but
Mm-hmm.
as you get higher up, as you get closer to high school, that becomes a problem. So
Yep.
this is the regulation 30 sub 2. Every minor child in Canada, other than a child of a
Other
temporary
than.
resident. Yeah. So if you're not authorized to work or study, if you as the parent doesn't have a valid work or study permit right now, then this is not going to be authority for your kids to be able to study without a study permit. So do reach out, book a consultation so we can understand exactly what happened and when and why and how old your kids are and what level of education they are trying to attend.
And one other thing I'll add to that is that you can see here that are not authorized to work or study. So it does not seem in your situation that you're in maintained status, but if you were in maintained status, in other words, had a work permit applied and your child had a study permit and applied to extend them before the current ones expired and you were in maintained status, then you're still authorized to work or study. So in that case, obviously a child would be able to continue to study. But when you're going, like I said, when you don't have that authorization, then that child is not authorized to study. Okay. Great question. That was a good one, actually. But hopefully, book a consult and we can dive into this a little bit deeper. Okay. All right. Let's see. So, HE Immigration says application. So, I'm assuming this is probably an immigration consultant. Application shows the final decision August 16th. Okay, about a week ago. What does that mean and what's next? What should I do next? Okay, so express entry application shows final decision. Well, there's nothing you can do next other than wait. So ultimately, it takes a little bit of time. If the person is inside Canada, then it's going to be the e-COPA process. You're going to get an email saying, "Hey, it's time to now finalize the application through the Express Entry portal, and to obtain your e-COPA, provide this information." And so really that's all. That there isn't much more to do if the final decision has been made, unless, okay, that final decision is not one that you want, which is a refusal, which also could be the case. And then once again, if it's a refusal and you feel there's an error, then contact us. We can assist with considering a leave application if that's merited. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all we can answer about that one, I think. Okay, Mansoor says, can my employer hire me on an LMIA, or they need to let me go and then hire as a new employee and not existing? If yes, what do they need to do? Well, that's an interesting question. And it actually touches on some of the fictions that exist in the LMIA process. Alicia, do you want to tackle that one for Mansoor?
Yeah, and so Mansoor, there's a number of moving parts here. And so what we normally do is we have a consultation with your employer, so your manager or somebody at the company who understands or is going to be taking part in the immigration process for workers. And we would talk to the company and talk to you about what your immigration goals are and what your status is. And so if you are an existing worker and you're not on an LMIA-based work permit, so I'm assuming you're on some sort of open work permit, then the employer must still demonstrate that they have tested the labor market. So if they want to retain you as a worker, they have to open it up to everybody and see if they can find somebody to fill your position. And sometimes an employer can justify, hey, I need two people who do exactly what my rock star Mansour does. But they're not going to say it exactly like that. They're going to say, here's the knock that I need. Here are the criteria experience-wise that I need for these candidates, and they will advertise it. They'll put it on Job Bank. They will put it on different advertising sources depending on whether it's high wage or low wage, and they will have to run those ads usually for 4 weeks continuously until they can do an intake, a recruitment effort to see whether Canadians apply for that job. And if no Canadians apply for that job, or if they hire one Canadian and they still need another position, then it's possible that they could go forward with an LMIA application and say, we advertised, we recruited, we really want two positions. We hired one Canadian that we found through our recruitment process, but we still want another position. We couldn't find another Canadian. We want to offer this job to a foreign worker. And there's a way to do an unnamed application where they just ask for a position, or there's a way to say, hey, we want this specific person to come on to fill this role, and they can put that in the LMIA application. So there's no inherent need for somebody who's currently working at the company to stop working and then be rehired, but it is really important in terms of timing. The company cannot offer you that job until they've legitimately done their recruitment process to see if they could find a Canadian instead. And so what they'll need to do is be careful to make sure that they're not giving an offer of employment to you as a candidate until after that recruitment has gone on. And you can't take that new role, of course, unless and until ESDC approves an LMIA, and you would have to do an application to change conditions to an LMIA-based work permit. So there's a lot going on there. And what we normally do is talk to you and talk to the employer so that everybody understands the process.
Yes. Okay. Let's see here. We've got another question. Okay, this is Sam. Maybe I'll tackle this one, Alicia. So Sam says, I count hours that I work as a ramp attendant when I'm scheduled and paid to work as a pilot as a skilled worker experience for, I think it's can I? Oh, do I count? Okay, so I missed that. So do I count hours that I work as a ramp attendant when I'm scheduled and paid to work as a pilot as a skilled work experience for express entry? My job title is a part-time first officer. So it all comes down to the duties and responsibilities. So I don't know exactly how a ramp attendant fits into the overall, job description of a pilot. If they're two separate occupations, then no. If one is, if the ramp attendant is say a tier 4 or tier 5 occupation, then no, you wouldn't count that as hours towards express entry. If it was a tier 3 position as a ramp attendant, then technically for CEC purposes, you would still break it out as two separate knocks and include it in your reference letter from your employer. But you would never, if the duties of a ramp attendant are not encompassed within that of a pilot. Once again, I don't know enough about this to be able to answer this, but if they're not, if they're two separate occupations, then to say you were a pilot and get a reference letter for the pilot and include your work experience and the hours worked all as a pilot, well, that would be a misrepresentation, and you never want to go down that path. So obviously I'm going to ring the bell again, even for you, Sam, and say, look, you really should book a consult so we can try to help sort this out with you. But generally speaking, it comes down to the duties and responsibilities that you're performing. And when you're counting hours, those hours are attributed to those duties that you're performing. If it's all one occupation and those duties are listed under the duties of a pilot, I don't know. Maybe they're not. But if they're not, then you wouldn't just include them, because that would be misrepresentation. You would separate that out as a different position. And it becomes complicated because I don't know how it's structured, right? I don't know how many hours if you worked as a ramp attendant first and then transition to a pilot, or when you're not flying, you have to do ramp attendant duties. Well, all of that needs to be factored in, and I'd need to take a closer look at everything. All right. Okay, Isabella, we'll tackle her question. She says, "Hi guys, what's your take on future STEM draws? There hasn't been one in a long time." Alicia, this is what we got for STEM.
Yeah, yeah. And so one of the interesting things when I was taking a look through the report, and the report, the Express Entry year-end report for 2023 is 68 pages. So it's a big, meaty document with lots of tables. And the interesting thing is a lot of those category-based attributes, like STEM, for example, are also getting picked up through other draws. So if you look down at table 41, for example, in that report, they mention that STEM people are getting picked not just through STEM draws, of course, but through CEC draws. And so there are a lot of different ways that you could get an ITA, even if there isn't a specific category-based draws, and vice versa, right? A French-speaking candidate is going to be getting all sorts of bonus uplift points, even if there isn't necessarily a French-speaking draw. They get a whole bunch of added benefit to a general draw or a CEC draw. So even though there hasn't been a STEM draw, I think if you do have STEM experience and there is another CEC draw, then that's where a lot of people have been getting their ITAs, even under STEM, under a CEC draw. So maybe there will be another STEM draw right now. We have seen, Mark and I were trying to crunch figures on how many category-based draws we've had so
Yeah.
far for 2024. There have been a number of category-based draws already. So it wouldn't surprise me if IRCC shifted to a few more general draws. They'll do more PNPs, they'll do more federal skilled workers, they'll do more CECs, hopefully more CECs, because it seems like they were a little bit short on CECs earlier this year for sure.
Yeah. And one thing that we did notice because obviously we looked at the report for 2023, and then we said, well, okay, well, what does the world look like for these rounds of invitations in terms of category based versus the other ones, the PNPs, the general draws, the CECs. We haven't had any federal skilled worker draws. But what does that look like for 2024 to this point, to August? And there has been a pretty significant shift where there's about 40% of the overall draws. I didn't calculate number of ITAs issued, but the overall number of rounds of invitations that are category based draws, all inclusive, everything from French to the STEM to ag, those ones, is about 40%. And so I can't remember what the report was. What percentage was it
About
30% or
25.
about
Yeah.
25% in 2023 for the whole year? And they could just start doing a whole bunch of general draws, and then that they could pull it back down so the category based are back in that 25 to 30 range. But right now the trend is about 40%. And we've spent we haven't spent a lot of time talking about this report because we're going to do a special episode on that, and Mark is actually going to get the podcast episode uploaded. But going forward, there's a couple things that people really have to understand, and economics is really driving things, and you have to take that into consideration. And if you're going to study in an area that's really quite generic, or you're working in an occupation that is saturated with tons of people, or it's in an area where it's never really been on an occupation in demand list. And I'll point out one thing, just kind of, as we've got a bunch of super chats that have popped in here that I'll try to get through as well. But I strongly discourage people from taking jobs with institutional employers, especially if you're hoping that somehow you're going to get maybe an LMIA from them in particular. And when I say institutional, it's large companies like your banks. And I don't want to single out just banks, because every once in a while, I guess if you're at a high enough level, they will do things to support you. But if you're like an advisor or something at a lower level in a bank, or you work for any other type of institutional kind of client, they are less, or employer, they're less likely to support your PR. And for many of you, if you want to stay, an LMIA is one of the ways to allow you to stay temporarily longer, and possibly, I say possibly, obtain permanent residence as a result of that job offer. But as we go back to these rounds of invitations, and let's just type in general here. Okay. If we look at all the general draws, for many people, even with the extra 50 points that you can get from an LMIA, if you're if you're lower than a C-suite level position, the rounds of invitation levels are still really, really high for the purposes of express entry. And so even with a job offer, it doesn't guarantee, an LMIA supported job offer doesn't guarantee you're going to get PR, but what it can do is buy you time. And for those who are unable to get those, well, the reality is you have to look at going home, taking all of the experience, the knowledge, the education that you've gained here, and using it to go home and make your life better, which is not something people want to hear. I get it, but it's something you need to consider. Okay, let's go to a few last ones here.
And just while you pull that up, Mark,
Mhm.
Alicia Dio was asking about intent to reside and having gotten a nomination from a province, and then she wants to move to Toronto. Please take a look. We're going to release that podcast. We did a whole podcast about intent to reside and the case law on intent to reside. And so anytime you actually have your PR and you actually went through the process and you've got your PR and now you're thinking, well, maybe I'll just move to a different province, even though I had an intent to live in that province, there is a risk that IRCC could say you misrepresented, right? We gave you a nomination based on the fact that you said that you're going to live in Nova Scotia. And as soon as you get your PR, you turn around and you pop off to Ontario. Definitely that could be a problem. So be super careful about that because you don't want to be misrepresenting and potentially losing everything that you have worked so hard to achieve. So be super careful. Take a listen to our podcast that we will be releasing soon on that.
Yes.
And Mark, will you pull up the next question that you're going to get to? VK is asking, how do we review an express entry application? That is what we do, VK. So absolutely, yes, it starts with a consultation. You would book a consultation if you want us to help you with your express entry profile or your EAPR and both. And we would sit down and go through with you what's your situation, what's going on. If you then hire us, then we work directly with you. And so we have a very evolved system where you get access to the course, the express entry course. We sit down with you one-on-one. We look through a shared document box folder where you've uploaded all your documents. We go through, you share your screen. We don't take your passwords. You keep control of your application. But at the end of the day, we've gone through everything with a fine-tooth comb so that when you submit your application, you know that it is been vetted by you plus us, and it is the best application that you can submit.
Perfect. Thanks, Alicia. And I guess to summarize all of that too, from my perspective, we love doing what we do. We love the model of practice. Alicia and I have been at this for over 20 years. And, the reality is this is a model that we have found is works for us. We can sleep well at night because we know it's being done properly. And we just love working directly with our clients, getting to know you, working in a collaborative way where we support each other. The strengths that we have, we pull into the mix, and your dedication and your desire to kind of drive your own process. It's a perfect marriage between the two. And we absolutely love what we do. And Igor, we're so excited to have him on board now as a full-fledged immigration lawyer, even though he's been working with us for over 4 years. And, he was heavily involved in his own immigration process when I represented him way back in 2018, 2019. So it's been quite a journey for us as a firm, and we love what we do. We love the way we do it. And you can go check out the Google reviews to see if you find other people might just like it too, which, is a pretty good reflection. Okay, let's see here. Okay, I think I'm just trying to pull up all of our supers that we have here. I'm trying to make sure I don't. Okay, ramp attendant. Okay, we talked about the stem draws. I think, we covered Isabella's question about your take on future stem draws. Okay, Micanet says, okay, the minimum CLB for tier 2 is CLB 4 for the Manitoba, PNP, I assume. But IRCC says you should get at least CLB 5 for tier 2. What would I qualify for express entry with CLB 4? So this is, I'm just going to try to guess here, Alicia, what she's getting at. But for the purposes of express entry right now, CLB 4 won't get you in, because to get in, you have to qualify through the Federal Skilled Trade Program, which I don't think, there might be a little bit of a barrier with a CLB 4 that would let you in as a Federal Skilled Trade Program, but we haven't done one of those in, I don't know, like 3 years. So it leaves you with the federal skilled worker program and the Canadian experience class. The Canadian experience class has a minimum of CLB5. The federal skilled, well, the yeah, the federal skilled worker program is a minimum CLB7. So with CLB4, I don't know, Alicia, other than if you go through a PNP and then go through an express entry stream. But even then, Alicia, I don't think it's possible, because you still have to meet the eligibility of CEC or FSW to get into the pool to be eligible for an express entry stream. So I don't think there's anywhere right now other than PNP programs that are non-express entry that target, certain levels. But even then, I don't know if there's
Yeah.
anywhere, maybe I'm missing it, that is a CLB4. Like Alberta
So
has some tier 4, tier 5 occupations that maybe the CLB is at a level 4 for, say, writing and reading. But yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and that was the exception, because I was looking for a client who's trying to figure out what they're going to qualify for. And you're right, Mark. So most of them require the CLB5 as a minimum, but some of them, and I can't remember, I think it's writing, but two of them are allowed to be at CLB4 for federal skilled trades specifically. And so the way it normally works is you've got to, if you're looking at express entry linked applications, then you have to meet the eligibility criteria for either CEC, FSW, or FST. And only then will you be able to be eligible for the express entry linked. But there are PNP programs that are non-express entry linked. And so if you get a nomination through that, then you don't have to go through express entry. You just do what they call paper-based, separate from the express entry stream.
Okay, Mansour says, thanks, I'm on a spousal work permit expiring soon. Do I need to get any document from separated wife to extend the work permit, even I am ineligible just to buy more time? Okay, so you're not going to
Ring the
submit an
bell, Mark. Ring the bell.
application. Yeah, we'll ring the bell. But Mansour, right off the bat, as far as buying time, you're not going to submit a work permit extension as a spouse if you are separated from your wife. Like, you're no longer fit within that category if you're separated. Now, like I said, what does that mean? What does separated mean? Are you separated from your wife because she's currently living in a different city and you're separated physically from her because you're working somewhere else, but your relationship is still an ongoing marital relationship? Well, that's different. So words mean things. And sometimes when we don't have enough words, Alicia and I are prevented from offering any direction. But when it comes to questions about I am this and what should I do, it's always one of these, and slide over and book a consult. So that's what we'd encourage you to do, Mansour.
And if you are legally separating from your spouse, so your marriage is broken down, then this is a big issue. This is a big thorny issue that needs to be carefully addressed, because you cannot be misrepresenting to immigration, right? You cannot get the benefit of an extended spousal open work permit if you guys have legally separated and there's been a marital breakdown, because that would be lying. So
Yes.
all these are things that we would need to discuss.
Okay. Last one from Mohammed. He says, after getting PNP, so he's got the nomination, I applied under express entry PNP draw and received an acknowledgement of receipt. Okay. But I found eligible under FSW, CEC, and PNP. Okay, but I was found eligible under FSW, CEC, and PNP. Do I still need to maintain proof of funds? So I don't know which PNP. I don't know which program. I don't know, like, ultimately when it comes to what the provinces do, it doesn't dictate necessarily what IRCC wants within express entry. If you're drawn under CEC, and this is the key, they will always default, but in your invitation to apply, it will tell you which program you were drawn under. If it's a PNP, then Alicia, what are your thoughts on in terms of proof of funds? Because we have a blog post on our website that covers this topic, and I encourage you to slide over and read it. But Alicia, do you want to tackle this last question for us?
Mm-hmm. And so Mark is right. Look at if you do get an invitation to apply, because it sounds like, Mohammed, you don't have an invitation to apply. But if you get an invitation to apply, then it's going to say whether IRCC is selecting you under CEC or a PNP. If you're selected under CEC, great. You don't need to prove settlement funds, because as long as you meet eligibility for CEC and you have an ITA under CEC, you don't have to prove settlement funds. However, if they give you an ITA under PNP, then it gets a little bit more complicated, because depending on the PNP program that you applied for and were nominated under, some of those PNP programs have settlement fund requirements under the PNP, or intent to be able to meet their economic requirements. And so sometimes you have to prove a combination of money that you have in the bank plus income in a job. Sometimes you have to prove that you have enough money to be able to economically settle based on wage or something else. And so if you have a PNP nomination federally under the ITA, make sure that you can prove that you're meeting all of the program requirements for the PNP that nominated you. And then if you meet CEC eligibility, you can have an argument. Hey, I met everything for this PNP where I was nominated. I also meet CEC, and you're going to explain what's happening with your settlement. So it is more complicated if you're nominated under PNP, and if the PNP also had different types of financial requirements.
Perfect. All right, guys, we have very quickly run out of time here. We've gone into overtime a little bit. Thank you so much for tuning in. Like I mentioned before, we have a bunch of resources on our website, and I strongly, strongly encourage you to slide over to holthelaw.com and take a look at what we have here. So in our blog and resources, we've got our blog, our podcast, our YouTube channel, and I want to thank everybody. We're just about at 60,000 here. We're really close in terms of subscribers, and we hope that the content we're sharing with all of you is useful. Now, I think everybody has the ability to search, and you know, this is one good thing with YouTube being, you know, controlled by Google. Like, the search capability is really good. And if there's a topic you're not quite sure about, or you want to learn more information, you can very easily just type in, you know, a word, and it will pull up a video that likely Alicia and I did in the past, or Igor has done, on just a whole variety of topics. And so we definitely encourage you to leverage off of that, as well as, like I said, our firm and the blogs. We are always doing blogs. I just released one just yesterday, which is quite interesting, on the freezes, and this is just the beginning. So temporary freeze on low wage LMIs in Montreal. And so, so check these out. And we've got a kind of a new format for our blogs, and they're kind of based on categories. So definitely go check them out, and we will, we're constantly adding new things to it. Finally, the last little piece that I want to share with you is the Canadian Immigration Institute. And like I said and hinted at the beginning of this live, tonight I have a masterclass tonight. Every 2 weeks I try to do it from about 4 to 6, depending on how many people are there. We basically answer all the questions, and if there's, if the questions run out, then we end, and usually it goes from about 4 to 5. But I always, if there's a large group and there's lots of questions, then this is an added feature that goes together with the Express Entry, the 2024 brand new, all created. Every single video was all recreated at the beginning of the year to accommodate for all the category-based draws, the tier system, all these things. But on top of the 10 hours of video lessons, we have these master classes where you can go and you can join, and it's kind of an interactive environment. It's not just like we do here with our live Q&A, where you just post a comment. People can literally get on and they can show themselves and ask their question in real time, and it's really quite a dynamic process through our hosting portal that we use through Kajabi. And I really, really like it. It's a lot of fun. It's much more intimate, and it's like we're all in a classroom together. So if you haven't subscribed, this, I believe, if you choose not to retain us, that's fine. We love for you to retain us. We love to work with you. We love to help you, support you in Express Entry journey. But at the very least, this Express Entry Accelerator will give you really key critical information to help you avoid the most common mistakes that people make. And it's not just lip service. Here's our top 5 list, but I literally go through and walk through every single aspect of the Express Entry process, from creation of your profile all the way down through. And there is just a ton of lessons. You can see the whole breakdown of the curriculum is all here. Everything from completing your Express Entry profile, broken down by applicant, spouse, dependent children, the EAPR here, there's a whole bunch of different things that will guide you. But of all of them, the mastering your document section right here, module 6, I think is worth every penny of the whole course. Each document has its own lesson that breaks down all of the things that you need to ensure that you do to get your document accepted. This records of employment one, lesson 48, is full of a ton of things. So make sure you go check it out. $347 US is what we charge. And and there is an ability to subscribe to just the profile as well if you want. And then of course you can connect with Alicia and I right at the beginning, and we can answer very, very specific questions that you might have. So all of that is available. There's a link in the description below. I encourage you to check it out. And this Express Entry Live Q&A is sponsored by the 2024 Express Entry Accelerator. All right, that pretty much wraps up our live Q&A for today. Alicia, any passing comments or remarks? Anything we haven't talked about that you want to tease up for next week's live Q&A?
There's always things that are popping in right at the last second, and so we're trying to get to as much as we possibly can to help as many people as possible. And stay tuned. We'll be bringing more content, and we'll be answering more questions next week. And do look for those intent to reside podcasts, and we will get those released as well.
Indeed. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us.